Hello there everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lydia's Crafty Corner with me, Lydia, in my little crafty corner. So today I'm going to be sharing with you how you can change the colour of embossing paste and use a number of different ones on a large floral stencil. As well as that, we'll be adding a little sheen to that embossing paste too. So to start with, I'm going to be using the Floral Drape stencil. And this is a really large one. I think it's 6 by 8. And I'm going to want to colour this different colours. So I'm going to be using the liquid watercolour in the Purple Wine, Sunkissed, and also the Just Green and Moss. So like I said, I am going to be using embossing paste. I'm using the embossing paste from Altenew. Now this is a bright white paste, but you can add colour to it using various different mediums. Today I will be using those liquid watercolours that I've just shown you. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of drops into the embossing paste, and then going to take a palette knife and I'm just going to mix them together just by squishing the colour in and moving that around just to make sure that it's nicely coloured. I did get some of that beautiful Sunkissed into my purple colour, but I will remove that with a tissue, so don't worry about that. So the first one was the Purple Wine, then I used the Sunkissed for the orange, and now I'm going to mix 2 greens, so I'm using the Moss. This is a really great colour. Now when you add the liquid watercolour into this embossing paste, it's going to get lighter because the embossing paste is a white, opaque kind of colour, so it is going to be really light that way. I am mixing a little bit of more of the moss into the Just Green to make it a little bit more earthy. So once I have all of my colours mixed, what I've done is I've added some temporary adhesive to the back of my stencil. So it's a spray adhesive, and I'm just going to pop this into place. Now I'm using some parchment cardstock, so this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, but you can use whichever colour that you want. I just wanted more of a different colour base for this one. So I'm going to start by adding some little highlights to those little flowers that we have in the stencil. So I'm just taking some of that orange embossing paste that we have there, and I'm going to add that into place. I'm then going to add some of that pinky purple that we have there, and then once I'm happy with the amount that I have on that, I'm just going to kind of scrape it off with the larger palette knife that I have there. Now I am trying my best not to get it onto the leaf sections. You can scrape that away, or you could also use some masking tape and mask these off before you started the flowers, but that's completely up to you, and it does take a little more time. So as you can see, I'm just going to keep going by adding a little bit of that pinky purple to the orange parts, the sections of the flowers, and then scraping that all away. And then once I'm done with the pinks and the purples, I'm then going to move on to the leaves. Now for the leaves, I did just use a mix of the 2 greens, and they kind of just mixed in together anyway, but I'm really loving this colour that has been created. Now I am trying my best not to get it on those flowers, but I did at points get it on. And the green and this beautiful pink colour that we have here didn't mix very well at all. So if you did mix these together, it might be an idea to kind of scrape those off before it dries. So once I've finished covering the stencil with this beautiful coloured embossing paste, I am going to remove this while it's still wet, and I'm then going to make sure that I clean off my stencil, my palette knives, my palette, and also my desktop. It's easier to do that once it is wet rather than dry. So once this is still wet, I am going to add a little bit of shimmer. So I have the beautiful translucent pearl embossing powder from Altenew, and I'm just going to tip that over the wet embossing paste and then leave that to dry. So once this is dry, I can see that I have a couple of that embossing powder sticking where I don't want it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dry paintbrush and just get rid of all of that embossing powder that's stuck to my card base where I don't want it to be. Now this is a pretty stiff brush. I find that the stiffer the brush helps, because it doesn't mean that it's going to splay and take any more embossing powder off the image that you want it to be on. So I do find that a stiffer brush and one that is very dry works perfectly for this. So once I've done that, I'm then going to take my heat tool and I'm going to heat set the embossing powder that is on top of the embossing paste. And this is going to give me a beautiful sheen to that coloured embossing paste, and also it has glitter in this embossing powder, so it's going to give me a little bit of a twinkle too. For the sentiment, I am going to be using the Better Together stamp set, and I'm going to be stamping this onto some vellum. So I have added some anti-static powder down beforehand, and then I'm going to stamp this using some embossing ink, and then I'm just going to heat set that using some pure white embossing powder. This is my favorite embossing powder. It's so beautifully white, and it does get into all of those little detailed places on there. So once that's been done, I did trim this down so I have a strip. I'm just going to play around with where I want that to be. Once I'm happy with the placement, I can then turn the card panel over and then adhere the vellum from behind. It's always best to adhere your vellum where you cannot see it, because it is semi-transparent, so you are going to be able to see the adhesive through it. So once it's behind, you're not going to be able to see that at all. Now, as my little panel was quite warped because of the amount of embossing paste that's on there, I did decide to use some wet glue to attach that to my card base. As it was wet glue, I did pop a couple of my acrylic blocks on top of them till it dried, and then it was good to go. So here is the card complete. I really do hope that you like the card and that you've enjoyed the video and the techniques involved. If you do create a card inspired by this, it'd be great if you do share, because we'd love to see. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Hello there, crafty friend. Lydia here. Just popping in to say that you can get your daily dose of crafting tips, techniques, and tutorials just like this by subscribing to the Altenew YouTube channel. All you need to do is click on that little bell up there and you will never miss a video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.